Different miles, same road. Let's get into it.
So the prompt, the thing we want to talk about today, right? So I'll start with a tiny story. I remember when I was a kid, I used to watch late night TV, but I wouldn't understand it, right? Some of it was just I wasn't aware of the world and things like that. But there was this clear gap between me as a child and the rest of the world. And obviously I overcame that over time. But as time has progressed, I feel like that gap either doesn't exist anymore or is blurred now because, well, I'm not sure why. That's what we're here to talk about. Mm-hmm. But it feels like that gap doesn't exist because everything is shared. Everything is accessible, right? Mm-hmm. And I wonder two things. One, is it a good thing that everything between parents and children, adults and kids, is shared? Or is it a bad thing? What are my kids actually growing into if there's nothing to change or overcome or anything like that, right?
Yeah.
So I'm curious to get your thoughts on that.
I think the gap is there, but the gap is definitely shrunk between what kids and adults do. I think one of the things, obviously, I think you can look at is social media, things like Instagram and TikTok, probably the two biggest ones. You can all see the same thing now. And I don't care about, what they say about parent restrictions anymore. Those are so easy. Those are easy get-arounds for kids. Kids can probably figure out how to get around that better than you can.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
Kid could probably put an age restriction on your phone, and you wouldn't figure out how to turn it off.
You're not right.
So I mean, what good is that anymore to me?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think in that sense, it's very blurred. I think you have to, Casey, you have kids that are, what's your oldest?
3.
So I think they still, like you said in previous conversations, they look to you as this bigger than life person, right? This God type of person to them, right? And I still think that's true up to a certain age. Now, I think what we have to think about is at what age does that gap shrink? Where I could be a kid when I was, back in the 70s or 80s, I could be a kid up to 10, 12, 13, 14. I think that at a certain age, that gap is still there yet, big gap, but the gap shrinks when you get to a certain age now where it wasn't before. So let's say, at 10 years old now, a kid, I don't know what that is. I'm not going to pretend to know what that is.
Random number. Yeah.
10-year-old is all of a sudden watching Instagram, TikTok. They got a phone in front of them now where you're not probably giving a 3-year-old a phone.
Right. Yeah.
My kids, so interesting. I didn't give my oldest daughter a phone until she was in high school. I said, nope.
Good decision.
Then my rules became really relaxed real quick once she had it and all the other kids were like, I want one. And I did. I think 7th or 6th grade. Actually, I got my youngest daughter and my middle child a phone at the same time.
Wow.
Right? Because I was like, I just want it to be over with this constant hounding. So that's kind of on me.
Sure.
As a parent.
When did they get their phones? The two youngest?
You're asking the wrong person. My wife could probably tell you.
I only ask because when I got my first cell phone when I was in 5th grade.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yes. My sister
flip phone.
It was a flip phone. There was no internet.
But it was
more of like a connection to my parents in case anything, south happens.
Okay, but that was a flip phone. That wasn't.
Yes,
my first kids' phones were
internet.
Apple.
Yeah.
Wow. iPhones.
Yeah. My sister got hers in 3rd grade, even younger. Yeah, I think it was more like a, my brother has it sort of thing. I want it.
Okay. So how old are you in 3rd grade? What is 3rd grade age again?
You start at 5.
Like at 8 or 9?
Must be, 8, 9.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But it wasn't internet, right? So it was the only thing you could do was make a call or use minutes.
Okay.
Pretty much.
But I guess, to kind of bring it all back, you make good points, but that gap, okay, so we accept that at very young ages, the gap is there because, there's just so much, right?
Yeah.
But what you kind of alluded to is the gap is shrinking or has shrunk
at a certain age.
At a certain
when they
age.
get up to a certain age, not your 2-year-old and you are, if you're too old sitting there watching the same TV show, you're forcing them to almost do it, right?
Yeah.
Or it's something their age, right?
Right.
Or age appropriate that you're kind of forced to watch as well.
Sure.
What is that age, I think, is what you really kind of got to think. Now, it's different for different people. I know that.
Sure.
But I think the gap's still wide between a certain, like, let's just call it 6 years old. I'm just throwing something out there, right? 6 years old. But then does that switch happen at 7 or 8 or 9? Like you said, your sister.
In all honesty, I think it's when they have access to like any type of internet device.
So you think that's a great equalizer?
So I think, like I got a phone in 5th grade, right? We had, dial up, but they were like barrier century. I couldn't just, we only had one computer, right? So if someone was on there, I couldn't go on it. Obviously, when I would go on there, there was, everyone could see. There was no like, anything hidden. But now you can get, let's say someone in 5th grade, when I got my phone, give them an internet device and they could pretty much do anything they want. They have access to any knowledge topic that they want, adult or not.
Right.
And they can get an answer in an instant. So, if they see their mom on Facebook, they're going to be like, oh, what's this? Yeah. Or if they have a friend who is on TikTok, right, they're going to be like, oh, I want to be on TikTok too. Right. So I think that's where it starts.
Interesting.
And then it sort of grows from there.
But my argument would be like, is that a good thing? So let's talk about the democratization of information, sure. Right? It's a great segue. So once everything became available to everyone equally,
right.
Everyone is equal.
Well, intelligence speaking, no. But
sure, yeah.
What's accessible to them, yes. Like some kid may take the same video and not be able to discern it the same way you do.
Right.
And they look at it differently.
You might have the same information as everybody else, but it's what you do with that information that sort of determines what happens.
Yeah.
So you might have access to all of the internet, but there's going to be like fundamental incentives. Like I said, mom on phone, on Facebook, your friend on TikTok. Those are the incentives is, okay.
Mm-hmm. But in the past, all information outside of school was filtered through the parent.
Somewhat, yeah.
Well, maybe not all. Maybe
right.
all is a bit of an exaggeration, right?
Well, how long ago are you talking?
Just before the internet.
I'm assuming when you were growing up.
Right. Well, yeah. When I was growing up, everything was filtered as a lens through my parents, for good and for bad, right? It allowed them to instill certain qualities in me or create certain dispositions within me that would carry forward the rest of my life.
Right.
I don't know if it's a good thing that everything is instantly available to everyone because now nothing is filtered through that lens.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree. I think, there's this book called The Anxious Generation, and they basically talk about when a individual that is younger gets internet access, how it sort of affects them mentally in their development. And so I think you're right. I think maybe it's like information overload and like you can't really discern what's right from wrong or what's good from bad at those sort of ages. But, if you have a big enough voice or a big enough group saying certain things, you sort of more lean toward a certain direction. For instance, we might make this podcast, right? And we might have one person that says something, but if they say it at mass where there's millions of people saying that, then it's more impactful, I feel like. But we have, with our experience of, of life, know what to say. Okay, this is a point, this is not. But when you're at the younger age, you don't, and you can sway any direction pretty much.
Some questions. Yeah. So when did Gabe especially, so you talked about how you had the internet, it was dial up, right? Eventually everyone in your family had and partook in the internet individually, outside of that one computer.
At some point.
Right?
Yes.
Did that change anything noticeably with hindsight? Probably at the time, it just felt like a natural evolution. Through hindsight, did something change?
Hindsight, I don't think so. Okay. I think at the time, it was so young, and like the social media platforms were so young in their infancy that, these like recommendation models or those didn't exist. At the time, it felt like another way to talk with friends when you're not in school.
Okay, so because there was no algorithm.
At that point, I think, I would say, because, if you want to, let's say do something with some friends, you have to make a call to them, or, then I think it started with texting, and then from texting it went to like, okay, you can go on AIM or MySpace, and it was a way to connect.
Okay.
But then the other social dynamics came out of it, like, why am I not on your top 8 on MySpace, or, these sort of things, know? Then it started to evolve later on. But at the time, I feel like I was not so young where it had a true impact, but I also think social media was just starting too, so it didn't also have a huge impact on me.
Okay. Similar question. When everyone got individual access to the internet and media and everything in your house, in hindsight, did something change?
So this is how blurred it is for me that I can't even remember that when that happened, right? I can tell you when my daughters got their Apple iPhones, things changed. I think because they saw their friends get some. And one friend gets that one cool thing, and the next friend's got to get that one cool
100%
thing, and they keep hounding you and bugging you.
You don't have an iPhone yet?
Yeah, right, exactly. The pressure of the friends, right?
Social, yeah.
So, it's really hard for me to tell you, what happened, how it became, were they always in their iPhones? But pretty much I would say the day they got them, they figured them out, and they were, unless mom or I brought up, hey, let's go do this or let's go do that, they were going to stick in their iPhone. But I think the other thing you got to look at is, so I think either way, if you get your kid an iPhone, they're going to become so infatuated with the things. But you as an adult are still teaching your kids these things. And even we as adults, my dad, myself, I think anybody that probably has an iPhone or an Android or any kind of phone that has access to all this is going to sit in front of their phone. And if your kids are watching you sit in front of your phone and get on it and look at watch videos and everything, and you show them like, oh, look at this cute little cat video or whatever, your kid is going to, like always, like throughout the ages, your kid is going to learn from their parents, kind of that society is going to give them that. But that's kind of why I think, because when you used to when my dad used to take me out to the garage and show me, hey, you need to know how to do an oil change.
Right.
Well, that was something that was beneficial to me later on in life, because you got maintenance of your vehicle, right? Whereas, hey, look at this cute little video of this cat and you're showing blah, 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 or this is how you should treat this, or this is how you should take care of this, and you're just showing them a YouTube video or whatever. You're not showing physically. I think, adults have to take definitely, responsibility, not just social media and the people that invented all that stuff, but we as adults have to take responsibility for that gap that has shrunk. I will take responsibility for that. Sure. I'm sure my wife will take responsibility for that.
That's interesting.
It keeps you, and what's the one thing your kids, when they, like when you were younger, I was younger, what's the one thing my parents would do to shut me up if I was crying in the grocery store? Like, okay, here, play with this can of food, or
do
here,
something.
have a cookie. They would open so they had to find a way to entertain you.
Yeah.
Now, hey, here's my phone. Watch this video.
Yeah.
Here's my phone. Watch this video. Here's a video in your car. Watch this video. Everything's about watching the video, because, and what is your kid going to do? And now, and so that's why you and your kid are sitting down watching the same shows, because your kid is so ingrained in that.
I would say I make a very conscious effort. Like, my kids have TV on at home a lot. Sure. We leave the house, there's nothing.
Yeah.
We left the house for a purpose.
I'm trying to think, like, if I'm just trying to step, because this is parent childhood stuff, but I don't know if if everyone has the luxury of sort of being able to say or keep track of like all their kids and what they watch and their domain expertise, I would say that, I don't know. I really don't. Is it fair to say that, some people are just saying, okay, I want my kid to be entertained. I'm exhausted from my 12-hour shift of work, and I don't really care what they watch. I just want them to be entertained because it's something off my list.
Well, that's a very fair point. I think all of our parents probably did that to us. Here's a cartoon. Here's like you said, right?
You got young kids. What do you do, Casey? I mean, what is what is your process? And I'll say this: when I ask that question, I want to say for all those parents out there that really make the conscious effort not to have social media, like you don't have Instagram, you don't have Facebook, right? You make that conscious effort not to do that, and that's gonna probably help your kids a little bit. But at some point, they're going to see it from their friends or whatever.
Right.
But I guess, kudos to the parents that aren't showing their kids that or keeping that from their kids, right? But it's because they're probably not on it, right? They're not on it at all, and that's the way they can control it. If they were on it, if they were on their phones all the time, that's where you're going to teach your kids. So my question to you, Casey, is you got the youngest kids here, right? How do you, for lack of a better term, shut them up when you don't want them, making a lot of noise or complaining or whining?
Yeah, so if it is in the house, it's definitely TV, some show. I mean, yes, it's always educational or, not certain things, right? But yeah, it's TV, it's media. But if we're out of the house, it's nothing. It's here. We go stand outside and you can cry until you're done crying.
Do you think, let's say you do run the ability to say no phone until, let's say, 15, right?
Yeah.
Are they at a disadvantage?
They very well might be.
At that age?
Yeah.
Like, is that fair to them?
That's a huge concern of mine, is what's the right line to draw? And to bring it full circle, like you had mentioned, it's almost forced abdication by parents.
It's
right?
difficult, yeah.
Because this is the medium, right? This is the thing this generation is using to shut their kids up. Yeah. Here's your phone, here's your social media, here's your whatever.
Yep.
Right.
My argument is, maybe not argument, my criticism, the way I look at it is, I think that's really bad because we don't control it. Like when you said the example of a TV show, I do it now. My parents did it to me. Here's whatever TV show I was watching at 5 or whatever. Yeah. They knew what the show was.
Right. Yeah.
I don't think that amount of knowledge exists with an ever-evolving algorithm that constantly feeds your kids whatever they happen to look at for one more second. And I think that's a real danger. And that is killing the gap, because back to our original conversation, now we're all looking at the same things, and I don't have any control over how they're interpreting it.
I think, I don't know, in hindsight, like I would say maybe the best solution is just to limit access, where they have access to this thing called the internet, right? But at a limited time interval. So
did you have limited access?
I don't think that would work. I think everybody wanted that, because I'm not saying don't limit it. Yes, I would love that. But okay, I'm going to go back to your when is the right age to get your kid? Is 15? Is it 14 to get your kid an iPhone or iPad or whatever? Really, their friends are going to dictate that, because you don't want your kid to be bullied.
Yep.
Right.
Hey,
you're right.
Social pressure. Yeah.
And then your kid comes to you every day crying. They get depressed. They get into a state where you're just like, oh my gosh.
You want to see them out of it.
You want to see them out of it. Right. So what do? You give in to that. I think that, again, it goes back to my point of the parent taking responsibility, sitting down and go, hey, how do you feel about that? This is my feelings about why I'm not giving this to you. Can you, and then, it's going to be a fight. It's not going to be fun with the teenagers. Yeah. That's what, to me, that's where
the topic, if I were to describe, hey, I'm limiting phone access because I want your mental development to be better, like that that has zero weight on whether I want the phone or not.
No weight at all.
Give me the phone. I want to, send TikToks to my friend.
Right.
I don't care that this has a lasting output on my mental health. Everyone will have it, right? So, I can make that argument. But
that doesn't make it.
Keep going.
Yeah, go ahead.
So then your kid comes to you, and they say, "But Dad, I just want to be a kid.
Oof.
I just want to be like my friends."
And
then are you taking away them being
their childhood?
Right? You're taking away their childhood, and isn't that what we're talking about? Like it's
It's a catch-22. It's a chicken and an egg problem.
And it's the evolution, and I think it's never going to go away. It's the evolution of technology and what's come. You could talk to somebody in 1956 and talk to them, and today and say, "Hey, what was it when you were a kid that you saw everybody doing that you had to do?" Oh man, everybody had this bike. Everybody had this, special little thing that I want.
Right.
It's just that technology has evolved, and when we were sitting down at breakfast earlier, we were talking about it and how, how we think that it just technology and everything just in the last 100 years, or let's say even 50 years, just boomed. Just like that. Probably if somebody from 1776 came up to here and they saw, let's just say somebody lived in let's say you were a vampire and you lived forever, and they came into life existence around 1300. They could probably tell you, I would think, in my opinion, would be able to tell you, these last 50 years, you guys have,
I mean,
just like blown the cover off.
It's so difficult because, I think the older you get in your life, the less you're more set in your ways.
Sure.
Right. And if let's say a younger individual gets a phone, they're more likely to keep up with that technology.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's sort of what I did when I was younger.
Okay.
I could explain to my parents exactly what all these things would mean, but they would never be able to understand it as well as I did because I grew up with it.
Right.
And even, this might be going to the blurring of between the two. I could explain to the adult what all these things were. They're like, what is it like? What is a tweet, a repost? They have no concept of what these things are.
Right. Yeah.
They don't really understand.
So
and because they don't understand that, they have no idea of what the impact in the development might be.
You're becoming the instructor.
And that's just now, right? There could be a platform, right? Well, that gets released when your kids are let's say 7, right? You might know what this platform is, but until 20 to 10 years later, you'll know the true consequence.
Right.
So, I don't know. I wouldn't say it's futile, but, if you might be able to, check one thing off that you have less concern on, but the next thing, it's not inevitable,
But then we're trying to be good stewards in an ever-evolving world that very quickly outpaces human understanding.
100%. And like Todd was saying, in 10 years, you basically have to predict what would happen linearly for 50 years. Because so much is happening. If I were to tell, my grandpa, hey, I have a block of glass that could give me all of the information in the world, they'd be like, what are you talking about? I could contact anybody around the world within seconds.
Right.
They wouldn't understand these sort of things, right? And they wouldn't understand like the second or third order consequences.
Yep.
Like because I'm able to contact anybody at any moment, you might always feel at edge, right? Because you feel like you might get a phone call. Something with bad news. There's all these things that you don't really think about.
Is there, let me, I just kind of want to shift gears a little bit. Yeah. Is there a TV show out there for kids still, just for kids that just are for kids? Like the adults won't really watch it or anything like that? Like you remember maybe you guys don't, I don't know. Sesame Street.
Gumby.
Sesame Teletubbies. I would never watch Teletubbies today. I don't know if parents, are those still out there for kids watching? Do parents let their kids watch that, or are kids so past that now that it's just like?
Yeah, I think let's exclude really small kids, right? Because they always have TV that's geared for them.
Right.
I do not let my children watch that. So there is.
Like, what's Cocomelon?
Yeah, right. There's always that stuff. But okay, so I'm going to give you a thought, and I'd like your feedback on it. So 30 years ago, when I was a kid, there was TV made for children that was palatable for adults to consume with them. Right. Think of all the early 90s TV shows. Like, there's some adult humor in there, but it's for the kids, right? Well, it's for action figures, right? But a different story. But then now it feels like it's made for adults, palatable for children. And I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing, because it becomes this shared fandom.
Mm-hmm. Do you have an example show? For an example?
Well, I get what you're saying. So
any Disney movie, any Pixar movie lately?
Okay,
yeah,
right. But okay, so I'm going to go back to technology on this. Imagine, I'm just going to bring up one cartoon that I watched as a kid nonstop, Transformers. Yeah. Oh man, that was a thing back then. Yeah. The way they transformed, they did everything. No. I watched that cartoon a couple days ago.
Yeah.
The old Transformers cartoon, and I was like, I could never sit through that. I could never sit through an episode, because the technology brought it up to where you're like, oh my gosh, they got Optimus Prime transforming, and they how digitally they make him transform, and all these moving pieces, and that grabs you as an adult.
Yeah.
Right? And maybe it's meant for a kid, but it grabs you as an adult because what you used to see, the cartoons, Thundercats, G.I. Joe, all that stuff is so much. It's a different animation, and you're just like, wow, I wish I had this back when I was a kid, right? So I think it's more about it's more, you're right, palatable for adults, but only because you as an adult saw this weirder version of it.
It could be the case that, I don't know, that people found that if they could make a film or whatever show that's palatable for adults and kids, they were able to, they were more likely to view it, because the kid would watch it and the adult would watch it, or vice versa. The adult would watch it and the kid would sit there.
Right.
Yep.
And maybe that's just how it happened, because, I'm trying to think of
so it's economics driven?
Potentially.
Okay.
I mean, I really don't know. But
that is a good point.
It could be the case that it wasn't saying, okay, we're, there is no gap anymore, but maybe they found that if it wasn't pinpointed to a child, that they could also have topics that were for an adult, the adult would watch it too, and the child would watch it. And because the adult liked it, they're basically the ones that choosing what's on TV majority of the time.
Yeah.
They're more likely to watch it. Maybe that's how it happened.
Yeah.
Like Bluey, that's a kid's show, but they have very adult dynamics in there. I know some of the dynamics. I've never seen it, but this is what I've heard. So
I mean, My Little Pony has an adult following too. But
Brony. But it's. I think that might be one thing you could think about, right? Maybe it was Pixar was intended for children, but they knew that the topics could be more adult-like. I don't know.
Okay, maybe let's take a slight turn here, because I want to keep on the fandom topic, but then why is nostalgia so powerful for the adults now? Because look at everything, like you just mentioned, a bunch of movies that are just pure nostalgia plays. G.I. Joe, Thundercats, I think they made a new Thundercats cartoon.
They did.
Or a live action, right? He-Man, I just saw the new trailer for He-Man yesterday, the new He-Man, the 3rd, 5th remake, whatever, right? Yeah. If everything plays to our nostalgia, then what do our kids have when they grow up? Our nostalgia? Nostalgia V2?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So they're bringing back He-Man and all that stuff, but I think they're doing that because they know, let's say in 30 years from now, nobody makes He-Man again or Transformers or what. Well, I shouldn't say that. What if they don't make He-Man or Thundercats or something like that again? No big deal. I think because I'm 50. I grew up with Thundercats and G.I. Joe and all that stuff. It's still relevant. They still got to play to that audience.
100%.
Right.
I mean, I grew up with Pokemon, and I mean, that's prevalent.
Yeah.
ever much so.
Yeah, we'll talk about Pokemon in a little bit.
But I think what nostalgia plays on is sort of the freedom and less responsibility and weight of the world. That it brings you back to a time where you really didn't have any responsibility and you were able to be free and sort of just,
But you were separate from your parents. And that's kind of
yes.
My point is our kids are getting our nostalgia V2.
Well, I don't know. I might get like some nostalgia from music that I've listened with my parents. That's pretty much it. But like the core, like Pokemon didn't exist with my parents.
Yeah.
These other, shows did not exist with my parents. But I mean, to say that there wasn't any type of nostalgia like that came for V2, like you mentioned, would
I don't think it's possible. But it seems so saturated now.
Well, sure. Yeah.
The nostalgia part? What do you mean?
Yeah, where we share so much with our children that used to be ours. And I'm not saying that's a completely bad thing, but if they have nothing of their own, if there's no transition from the things they used to love to the things they will love, right?
Yeah, I mean, so you're right. Like my dad wouldn't sit down and watch Thundercats necessarily, or Saturday morning. Remember Saturday morning cartoons?
Yeah, I love Saturday morning.
Remember that? That was like straight cartoons from like 8 in the morning, and that's 11. Why you got up, right?
Yep.
Pac-Man and all that stuff, and but my dad would never sit down and necessarily watch that. Maybe every now and then, but I think again, so. The concept, the people that brought these things to life, the Pac-Mans, the Thundercats, and all these other cartoons, brought them into our life that early. But I think they're mainstays. I think they're things that can keep on working, and it just works. It keeps working, and now it's nostalgia to you as an adult, because you grew up with that, and now you're seeing it, like I said earlier, in this technology that's brought it to life in a whole new way. So. Yeah, that's going to happen. Like, I wasn't going to, I don't think they were going to bring back, I'm trying to think of something from my dad's time when he was a kid. I don't think they're going to bring something back that was in black and white, had like strings for puppets and stuff like that. That's not going to come back because it wasn't in color.
I mean, they brought back the Lone Ranger. They brought back.
Yeah, but to what extent?
The Green Hornet?
To what extent, though? I mean,
that's my point.
To like once or twice. They brought those things back. They brought back Lone Ranger for a movie. They brought back Green Hornet for a movie, and it went nowhere, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, if your child decides that they like the Green Ranger or the Green Hornet, I mean, sorry, I've never.
The Green Ranger.
Now we're talking about Power Rangers.
Yeah.
But the Green Hornet, is that necessarily bad?
It's not bad in a vacuum. It's not bad in a singular instance when their entire childhood is our entire childhood as a V2.
I would say that.
You think that's
I think
much?
that's extreme.
Okay.
Yeah,
fair.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think our nostalgia and them bringing it into our kids' lives is like Transformers or anything like that. I think it's I think it's the message behind it now.
I think, in short, the question that Casey's trying to say is like, how do I make sure that my child develops into an adult because it seems like there is no gradient to say, okay, you're a kid and you're an adult now. It seems like everything sort of meshes in the middle. And so is there an actual development to being an adult? I think that's like at a core fundamental topic. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I definitely am not that great, putting this out there. I think you said it much more eloquently, but yeah, that's essentially what I'm getting at. If there is no gradient, if there's no path, what are they, turning into? Like, is it an adult? Kind of, maybe, sort of. I don't know,
I could care less if someone is like a weeb and they love their own fandom or whatever, but I think what makes someone an adult is sort of the amount of responsibility that they have and sort of accountability. I think those are the two things. that sort of STEM, right? If you can, bless you.
No, I was sorry.
I think it starts with a job, because a job, you're given responsibilities to execute, and then upon that execution, you get a wage, right?
Right.
So that's sort of the trade.
Interesting.
And then accountability is holding it accountable. So if you fail, then, there's a consequence for it.
Okay.
Casey, when did you start going to work?
14. 40 hours a week.
Oh, so back
14.
then you were going
40 hours a week at 14?
Nope. I needed my own money.
Oh my God.
Was that a result of your situation when you were younger? Like, and I don't mean like so you said you needed money, right? Yeah. Like needed money for you, or you needed money to help support people around you?
I needed money for me.
For you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't really need.
So interesting. Okay, you're 14. You're not like fully grown, fully developed or anything like that. What led you, prior to that led you to that realization? Because actually, this is good because you went to work at 14. I'm saying my girls went to work at 13 or 14, right? And I'm not saying other people didn't in my time frame, but what led you, what brought you to that point at 14?
I mean, family dynamics and stuff like that, play into everything. But I think if I could break it down to like one core thing was I wanted more of the world than what I was getting and what I was offered in my childhood, through no fault of my parents. I do not blame my parents. They did the best they could with what they had.
Right.
But internally, I needed to go explore the world, and I knew I needed money to do that. So the first opportunity I had to make money, I did.
Did you, retrospect, do you feel that was like the transition from being a child to an adult? Is when you said, okay, I'm going to start working in order to, let's say, hit some sort of outcome or goal?
I would say that was the beginning of it. And I made a lot of stupid choices with that money up front. So I wouldn't fully consider myself an adult, but that was the start of it.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I'm sort of correct on accountability and, okay.
So did the gap start shrinking years ago more than we think? Or
I think,
is it should we not look at, maybe we shouldn't look at work as being the gap. Maybe people were working at 13 or 14 years now. A lot of kids were working 12, 11 on the farm, driving vehicles.
Yes. Work has a lot of different forms.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think that's something we can't really say that really shrunk it. And I would say I'm first to be wrong in that. Maybe that's right. Because now that I think about it more, something, I guess I would like to know more about something in your life drove you to you being for you. Obviously, you didn't think you needed to. Some people start at 13 or 14 to work because they need to help their family. Yep. You're saying you need it for you, whether that was something around what you saw in your life and, whatever that was. I'd just be interested to know if there's one thing you can hit on in your life that said, I needed it. Because at 14, at 14, I'll tell you what, at 14, I was thinking, hey man, I'm going to go ride my bike to my friend's house and we're going to go shoot BB guns or whatever, or, something like that. I'm not thinking, I need to make money and I need to work 40 hours a week.
I needed to get out of here. I grew up in a town. Well, you grew up in a small town too.
I grew up in a small town, but I was fine with it.
I was not. I was not fine with it.
And I think that's part of your surroundings. Maybe, and I'm exaggerating, maybe you grew up around a bunch of people that did drugs or drank. Maybe that's true. Maybe you worked around people that were just inconsiderate and mean and you just wanted to be rid of that. I didn't grow up around stuff like that, so I was okay with small town. I would be okay with living in a small town today, but I don't know what you experienced. And I think that's the thing that we're not thinking about is, what did you experience? What did you experience? What did I experience? Are three completely different things in our life that led us to do what we need to do. And I think that's the same for my daughters and what they experienced. Maybe they experienced with me and my wife that they knew we weren't going to pay for pants that they wanted that were $50 and that was, this shirt that cost, $40. We were going to get them the simple things. But you know what, them starting to work at a young age and spending money on stuff did to them? It made them think about their finances a little bit more and what they wanted to spend money on. So what did they start doing? Thrift shopping.
Yeah.
They go to Goodwill, they go to St. Vincent's, whatever it is, to get their clothes at $5 or $10, right? So now this $50 pair of jeans, oh my gosh.
Do you think a child would have made that decision? I don't think so. Like if you're penny pinching and being a little bit more, I said wiser with your money, I would say that's more adult behavior. You see that today.
The more I think about it, I don't think the gap is with the work and when people started work. I thought that might have been one thing, but I just don't see that because of you working at 14 and working 40 hours. My kids were not working 40 hours.
No, I was.
Right. I wouldn't allow them to work 40 hours. No way, because it wouldn't benefit them school-wise. But I'm not saying, I'm not bashing your situation.
Oh, no, I sucked at school. I wouldn't worry about that.
To me, I just go back to social media and technology being that thing that is not allowing kids to be kids and adults to be adults. And that's the big separation, is that's like completely close that gap.
Maybe it's a little both. So you brought up an interesting thing, or both of you did, about how, if we go back 100 years, everybody worked on a farm for the most part. And you started working the second you could pick up something worth picking up.
100%.
Right?
Because your parents said you had to.
If you didn't, there was a consequence that, whatever.
So,
it could be.
But now there is almost, 7, I'm going to butcher this number. It's somewhere above 65% of all jobs are... It's somewhere above 65%, where all jobs are an amount of sedentary, right?
Yes. Yeah.
It's something like that. And we can fact check that
What
later.
do you mean by sedentary?
Like, it's an office job. It's, maybe I get up and move a few things, but yeah. So because that manual labor and machinery and everything, those kids now, or kids in that time frame, they now don't have to do any of that.
Yeah.
So now there is this thing called childhood that was maybe more of a word before, and now is much more of a concept that we're still maybe working out.
Maybe.
So go.
Like I now I try to play that in socioeconomic. I'm assuming some I don't know, 100 years ago, someone who's very wealthy, they probably had that type of childhood.
Sure.
Where they're like, I really don't have to do much. I'm pampered and things like that. And then there's this, as they grow up, they're known as a Nepo baby, or everything is given to them. They sort of act childish when things don't go their way. And so maybe you're right, where you say, 100 years ago, you're working on the farm. You have sort of this grit to get things done because that's how it had to be. But now with advances, you don't need to do that. And maybe this sort of makes sense akin to the 100-year-ago Nepo baby,
So so what you're talking about is, to me, kids weren't as spoiled as much in the past as they were now, because parents knew what a work ethic and a good ethic in their children meant, I think. And I'm not saying, again, I don't want to say today that they don't, because I think most parents do, but I think that some have lost that, and they have given their kids these bikes that are motorized now. They have given these kids, and then you as an adult want a bike that's motorized because your kid now has a bike that's motorized, and you love that concept. And you got your kid this little four-wheeler, this little 100cc four-wheeler, and now you're like, I want a four-wheeler to ride along with whatever it is. Or you got or the opposite, you had a four-wheeler and you said, hey, I'm going to make my kid this whatever. I think it's easier to spoil our kids now today with the technology that's out there and make it affordable. Not that that's wrong, but people are going to take advantage of that. And so, when I was a kid, kids weren't riding around on four-wheelers, on 100cc four-wheelers. They were riding around on their little electric cars that their mom got them that could go around the yard for about 15 minutes before it ran out of juice. But, the other, maybe a year ago, I can't remember, 4th of July, I'll say, little kid, we went to a friend's house to watch fireworks, and this kid was riding around on a little four-wheeler. I mean, this kid couldn't have been 6, 7 years old, riding around on a little four-wheeler. It was hey, I've always been able to do this type of thing.
Right.
Again, it's technology for me. Technology has brought it into this world where you can be like your parents. They got a 4-wheeler, get your little kid a 4-wheeler. You got a motorized bike, get your kid a motorized bike. Where those things didn't exist. There was a difference between a BMX bike that was meant for kids, an adult bike with big tires on, and it was.
Nowadays, you don't have to work as hard to get the outcome you want.
Right, exactly. I think so.
That's the point. Like, if I want, let's say let's say I want a 100cc bike, I just click a button and it's there. I don't have to build it. I don't have to go shop around. It's simpler. And I think maybe third order, second order consequence is because the responsibility of, is sort of dramatically decreased, you might consider adults being more childish.
Yeah.
But it's because, nowadays I can just click a button and it's there. Or the barrier to entry in order to get what I want is dramatically lowered.
Yeah, that's a good point. It is. The barrier is dramatically lowered. I think parents.
So I'm willing to handle if I know that's the case, why am I gonna, for instance, I have a Roomba and it vacuums, I don't know, twice a day and it mops, right? I might have, when I was younger, had a chore to vacuum, right? That was my responsibility. Oh. Now I don't. I click a button and it's done. Yeah. Does that mean, no, I can make the argument that I have more time to do other things.
Sure.
But
so, okay, let's talk real quick about that. So reducing the cognitive load, right? That's a great thing. Yeah. But how do you know how to use that valuably?
The remaining time that I have.
Right.
I can do whatever I want with it. That's the thing. You don't. There is no proof. Usually it'll be more like, now that I have this free time, I'm not vacuuming the floor. I'm going to go play a video game or something enjoyable, I would assume.
Yeah.
But
this is going to go back to a little bit about kids watching us on our iPhones or whatever and doing what we do, copying us. So technology gets brought into your life, and as an adult, and I used to have to wash dishes in the sink.
Yep.
Right?
Right.
And then the dishwasher became more prevalent in the household, and you could use it anywhere. Now it's just the mainstay in all houses, right? Nobody's building a house without a dishwasher. So you put all your dishes in the dishwasher and wash them. Your kid sees that as they grow up, and when you go and tell your kid, hey, wash the dishes.
Right.
And they start putting it in the dishwasher, you go, no, that's not what I mean. Wash them in the sink. They're going to be like, no, that's not the way you do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Roomba. Vacuum the house with a Roomba. All you do is set it with your phone, map it out like my wife does.
No, you have clean floors.
Your kids see that, and you tell them, "Hey, no, you're not using let the Roomba. No, you're going to use a regular vacuum cleaner." What are they going to do? They're going to keep saying, "No, the Roomba's there. Why am I doing this?" And they're going to give in, and you're going to be like, again, technology has given us as adults this path to easier lifestyle that our kids are going to see and be the same. And you can't fault the kids for that, because that is what it is, and that is what's going to be.
Yeah.
It's just, it's a product of what technology is bringing into this world, right, wrong, or indifferent.
There's a show on HBO. I can't remember what it is, but it's basically they take these families. I think there are four different families, and they're dropped in sort of the countryside where they have to live as pioneers. Their house, there is no house. The house, it doesn't have any windows. Basically, they have to build windows. They have to build the farm, and they sort of, you see the amount of responsibility they have, and they really don't have a choice to sit down and, enjoy these sort of luxuries. And I think that sort of, I think the tie to adulthood sort of stems with the amount of responsibility you can take and deliver on. That's what I think. And I think technology sort of taken away some of those responsibilities because it makes it so much easier. We're just like, okay, well, I click a button and it's done.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so then, back to kind of my original point with this. So I think then childhood was maybe a word until technology made childhood a concept and a reality.
Maybe.
By reality, what do you mean?
So the word childhood back in 1805 meant working on the farm, which we kind of all talked about is not really childhood once you, hoist responsibility on yourself or your family, right? But now that technology has reduced the cognitive load for everybody across everything, childhood is actually a fairly new concept, and I'll back that up with an example. Everybody and their mother talks about, this parenting hack or this parenting,
Sure.
This thing.
Sure.
The same way, people who scam health products do, the same way people who, scam anything do, right? Everybody's an expert. Well, maybe there is no expert because now it's this ever-evolving landscape, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think childhood probably has different forms. I think maybe childhood is, maybe back in the day was more of a, okay, you're from this age and this age and you existed. Now, whether you did adult things or took on adult responsibilities, that's different.
Right.
Now it seems like childhood today is more based on, you have so much free time compared to years ago. Like your day's not filled with responsibilities.
Right.
Like, it might, I think that's the way it looks. Like I could not imagine, like when I was in school, going to a library, pulling a book, reading it to understand a topic for homework. I could not, the amount of time that would take. But I have a feeling that probably people who have done that understand the concept 10 times better than me.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I
think of the perception. Yeah. I think of the perception of childhood from 2,000 years ago in every generation, let's say every 50 years or whatever, or every 30 years. If somebody was able to do a podcast 1,000 years ago and say, hey, let's talk about the gap between children and adults now, what would that conversation look like? Would they say, the kids nowadays, you give them so much, whatever that is. I'm not going to, I don't know what that would be. Yeah, we let them,
run the tick-a-tocks,
run the horses now on the plows. And before we never let them do that. They had to plant the seeds, but now we let them drive the horses,
Yeah.
What would that conversation be? Maybe the perception of childhood is going to be different every
100%.
30, 40, 50 years, and it is what it is. And we see it from what technology is brought in, and they want to call it technology back then, but technology was, now I got a plow behind my horses instead of me trying to manhandle a plow to do whatever.
John Deere does it,
Yeah, now John Deere does it, whatever. But
so I like where this is going. So along the lines of technology and reducing the cognitive load, I'll start with you, Gabe.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you use your additional time due to technology in a valuable way?
Probably not.
So you have the introspection to say, yeah, I might be misusing some of it.
I 100%. If I could have for instance, let's use the vacuuming example. If I could have my Roomba vacuum for me while I'm watching something on TV, okay. I don't think, unless there is a demand for me to do something else that I need to, sort of leverage my time in a sort of super efficient way, then there is no need. But it seems like any time I have additional time that's sort of given to me, I sort of use it for whatever I want.
Okay.
It's not repurposed or let's say repurposed into doing more work, if that makes sense.
Interesting.
I say, okay, well, I'm going to leverage these gains in my benefit. And the benefit is, okay, I get more free time.
Okay.
I think overall, that's what probably will happen in the long run. I think, I don't know, I've heard this concept of people dying of jest, where they sort of get entertained to death almost.
Yeah.
So I think there's a balance, but,
sure.
Yeah.
Todd, same question for you and your family.
Everything that technology helps me do today is the same kind of concept as Gabe. Let's say everything leads to me sitting on my couch and watching TV and being relaxed. Because I think ultimately, excuse me, a lot of people that have work, come home from work 40 hours, 45, 50 hours a week, whatever that is, they just want to relax. But you got to come home, you got to do the dishes. So what do? I come home and I do the dishes, I put them in the dishwasher. So I don't have to wash them by hand. I put them in the dishwasher to do my next chore, which let's say is, I'll just put one out there that I really never do anymore, mopping the floor. Well, now I'm going to mop the floor with the latest and greatest technology, maybe my Roomba, and say, hey, Roomba, go ahead. I want you to mop this floor. Each of those, whether one leads into me doing the other, what was, I could probably bring one up here. So I went to an event, a retirement event on Wednesday for a guy I used to work with at home. My wife wanted the dishes done. Thomas wanted the dishes done prior to us leaving and everything.
Sure.
And she knew I was going to be at this event. So Tuesday night, she said, so we got to do these dishes still. I said, well, I'll do them after I get back. Right. But then there were other things I had to do too. I had to pack after that. So I went and I did the dishes and I let the dishwasher do the dishes so I could go pack. So then I went and packed. Now there's no technology that's going to help me pack. I use my good old 2 old hands here to fold my clothes and pack and everything like that. But then, going right into, I got a dishwasher at home I can put these dishes into quick, leads me to get to packing quicker, which then leads me to relax. I think it all leads
so unless
to
there's like unless there's like a forcing function for that day for me to use that time in, my, let's say, free time to do something else, then I will. But the default, if like there was a logic tree, the default is relax. There is nothing that says, okay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But is anybody doing it? I mean, are you doing something that technology helps you do to free up your time to go into the next working thing or the next working thing
during the workday? Absolutely.
You do.
I think
go ahead.
Casey's concept of like free time doesn't exist.
I want to know. Well, let's hear what that is.
I am not some workaholic. Like if I get free time at the end of the day, I'm spending it with my wife or we're watching TV. But during the day, I will eke out every bit of efficiency I can. If I can have AI do a thing for me so that I can do another billable thing, I will 100% do that over everything else, at least during the day.
Sure.
Okay, outside of work.
Outside of work. Yeah, it is probably the same thing.
Because I'm going to do the same thing at work. I'm going to, when I have to work, I work. I'll let Copilot word this for me real quick so I can go into I can do my next thing and outside of work. Where do you?
All right, this is a tough
reflection time.
So I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I just work all the time. I don't.
Okay.
But that is where my mind always is. If I can have the dishwasher do the dishes and the robot vacuum the floors, I'm going to think about work.
Yeah, I think that sort of stems when I'm not a psychologist here, but I think since 14. You should have been sort of in this loop.
Yeah, maybe right.
Maybe that's what it is. But for me, it's like, okay, I have this free time. I get to spend this free time. Now, I think of it as sort of like a pseudo retirement. Like for instance, when I got a dog, and I was concerned about how much of my time I would need to allocate just for the care and everything I need to do. So, there was a forcing function behind it. Say, okay, well, I need to spend at least 2 hours a day. It needs to go outside and run around because if I don't, then I'm going to have my couch is going to be bitten to shreds. So maybe with the kids, you're sort of there's a forcing function to do that.
Yeah.
Right. But for me, I enjoy the free time. Yeah.
Yeah, mine is free. I understand the value of work, Casey. And I think obviously you do too, Gabe, and what you need to get done and all that stuff. And maybe it doesn't burn you out, but it does burn me out if I'm going to constantly work.
Well, let's jump back into it. So, Gabe.
Yeah.
Go ahead with what you got here.
Okay, so there's this sort of idea of, I know Casey, you're talking about, the transition from childhood to adulthood, right? And it sort of seems to be blurred. But in like retrospect context, is there like a difference between someone who's 35 who plays football versus someone who is 35 but also plays video games?
I would say no.
One seem more childish than the other? Or are they sort of, it's
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. I would say as video games evolve to become a medium of entertainment all their own, it's no different.
Yeah.
I would say 20 years ago, it was
Sure.
Very different.
Yeah, I think you see any interview now with a football player, especially, what do they tell them about their free time? Oh, I like to play video games, or they'll play I mean, and today, again, it's all about technology and the evolution and what's going to happen anyway. And I think that, that doesn't make them any less athletic. As a matter of fact, people are more athletic than they were back in the day because of advancements in, workouts and stuff like that, and what they do to get people prepped. And the video game is just a downtime for them that I didn't really think about after a football game or when I was in sports or anything like that. I thought about going home and the chores I had to do, or going home and, taking my bike out to the woods and just being a kid that way instead of, sitting in front of a TV. I don't know. It's just, it is what it is. And I really don't think it's that big of an issue or big of a thing that differentiates.
Sure.
Kid to an adult and stuff like that.
Each of them are sort of unique in their own way. Maybe, when Casey, you're younger, Todd, when you were younger, you had football was sort of like your leisure time, right? That was sort of maybe a source of entertainment. And as, things, that leaves you more likely to play that game now. But for me, it might have been video games. And so when you're 35, still playing video games, it's akin to, being 15 playing football.
Yep.
So I really don't see the difference. I think there are differences in like physical, physical needs or limitations.
Yeah.
I think, in those aspects. But when it comes to, one being childish versus one being more, I guess,
is it a mental thing though? Does it maybe does it help those sports individual? I know they do it for entertainment, but what does it do for them and their mental capacity? Maybe it helps define them a little. Maybe it helps them think a little bit more. Maybe it helps them.
What do they gain?
What do they gain out of that? Actually, maybe they gain something out of it because they got to make. In some games, you got to make quick decisions. I don't know what they're playing, but you got to make quick decisions. In football, you got to make quick decisions. In baseball, a lot of sports, you got to make quick decisions, right? Because you don't have that time to go, oh yeah, I need to hit this ball back from this serve that this person hit at this location. That ball's coming at you. You better practice that. You better make that split second decision. And that's the same thing in video games. And I thought, and you guys would probably know this more than I thought they did a study that video games help you make quicker snap decisions than ever before, right?
It wouldn't surprise me. I don't know this study, but it wouldn't surprise me. Like I've seen people react to like things within milliseconds, and you're like, what? How is that possible? You sort of think that they're cheating.
How does this guy from 500 yards away in this video game shoot me right in the middle of the head, and I can't do it?
Blinked,
what's going on with that?
Right. I don't. It's interesting because I've also heard that people who are really into video games akin them to like a pseudo career, where they play video games so much that it sort of lives as almost like a pseudo career that you exist in, right? You're playing these FPSs, you're playing all these other games, and you're like, oh, look, I'm level 100. It's akin to someone who's like, well, I'm an executive at this organization.
Can I don't know if this plays into or I can segue into something, but the thing I was thinking about is the monetary value that kids want to make today versus what they made back then. So, for instance, when you went to work, Casey, at 14 years old, were you just worried about working and making whatever they gave you?
Yeah.
Or did you go into that job and go, well, if they're not going to pay me $15 an hour, I'm not doing it. Exactly, right? I think today kids see their adults getting all these great technological things, and they want all those great technological things. Where I, as a kid, saw my dad get a car, maybe a vacuum, all these things that were meant to help around the house, not necessarily, boost his entertainment like ours are today. A lot of things I buy, I'll be honest, boost my entertainment. Right. It's what I want. I think kids see that now today, and they want to go kid out of college. I shouldn't say kid out of college. A young adult out of college or even out of high school wants to sit behind the desk and make $40 an hour right off the bat and be able to afford all this stuff. And they think they can because somebody tells them that they can. And that's why it's making a comeback now. But that's why all your blue collar jobs, your machinists, your electrical guys, your plumbers and all that stuff, that's why kids weren't doing that stuff, because that was all physical labor that was paying cheaper at the time. Now it's paying a little bit higher. Yeah. It's a job you can get right out of high school, because a lot of kids now today can't afford college the way it is, or just aren't meant for college, right? But I think there's
I have a couple thoughts.
But, economics shifted the baseline.
Economics and the way kids see that, and they want the monetary value right away versus working their way up.
I don't. So I have a couple thoughts on this.
Yeah,
I think you're right. What you're saying. I think it's more of those types of levels that they're seeking take time, and they're not used to putting in copious amounts of time to get it. So
effort, yes.
If I need something, like I mentioned before, it's a click away. That need is satisfied within seconds. And so I think it becomes sort of like the standard that they sort of set, where it's like, well, I'm not willing to spend 5 years to climb this ladder to get to $40 an hour or something. I could click a button and sort of like that cycle sort of is set in place.
But isn't that crazy that they want more money because all they got to do is click a button now?
Well, I think that's the incentive. Like if I were to, let's say, get someone who was working on a farm, they probably wouldn't have that issue, I would say, because they know they probably will work more for less, I would say. I think you get so adjusted to doing a couple little things for such a dramatic outcome that careers aren't really built like that. Usually you have to be obsessive in order to do those sort of things.
Right.
And
like
so
Casey,
I think everything comes at a cost. In this world, everything, there's always an exchange. There's nothing like it just, and it's, I think.
But it seems like adults knew that more back then. And now adults are telling kids, you can make $36 an hour here versus where you're working at here, $34 an hour. Yeah, this guy brought you up. He trained you. He's a great guy. He's a great mentor.
Yeah.
Oh, well, but this guy told me over here I can make $36 an hour. But that guy didn't tell you anything about the environment at that other place.
Yep.
And basically leading you down kind of the wrong, I don't want to say the wrong path. He could be leading you down the right path, but leading you down a path that you're not going to do any research on. You're just going to take his word for it because you used to work for him.
I agree that
or work with
what their experience is probably true, but they probably didn't have all of these platforms to sort of compete against. Like if you had a job, let's say doing this machinist work, and you're saying, okay, I can make $2 here, $2 elsewhere. Let's say that is a bad company. That you basically just go online and find a new company.
Because of technology, you can find one real quick.
There is,
right?
You can,
you can text your buddy 100%, where you couldn't do that before.
And you probably know someone that's working there.
Yeah.
So these are sort of like these things that, second, third order consequences, but that's what would make sense.
I'm not saying that, again, technology is going to do this. It doesn't matter.
Right.
I think, where do we get back to telling our kids and young adults that, hey,
there's more.
Culture matters a little bit. There's more in the relationship than just the monetary value. Do you really need to make $2 an hour more? Where does that get you? Does an extra day of vacation get you anywhere better where you're not conversing with any of your workers at all at your job anymore? But over here you did, and you liked it, and you had a good time, and you went to Christmas parties, and you did this, and everything was much better. But now you're taking, because you get maybe an hour, less time to work, which, maybe that's great, but You don't talk to anybody at work. You're kind of mundane and doing that stuff all the time. It's almost like, he told me it's $2 more an hour. I'm going to go over there without even really thinking about it.
My assumption is that $2 is more than just the monetary in their eyes. They're probably saying, oh, I can get a house this much faster. Oh, I can get these sort of things much quicker. And well, I would agree that they don't, probably the culture is horrible and all these things. And this guy who taught them, is more, let's say, more likely to give them a promotion maybe sometime in the future because of the relationship that they built. My guess, and I'm not saying I'm right here, but in their eyes, that extra $2 gets them to some goal that much quicker, even though they might have to suffer in exchange of, I don't talk to my coworkers, I get an extra, all of these things. That's my guess.
Yeah, I mean,
think long term, like in the long scales, I would prefer to work with the guy who taught me, right? And because I think there's more to that. He might know somebody. There's so many ways that it can branch out. But I think keeping good relationships with people is sort of at the core value.
That should be, yeah. I mean, keeping good relationships, obviously. Can you imagine somebody listening to what we're talking about now going, I did a study on this, guys. And writing in some kind of comment, guys, we did a study on this. Guys, we did a study on this. Yeah, we know you all did your study on everything. We're just kind of three guys talking about it.
Listen to the intro again.
Yeah. Lots of people have done lots of studies about a lot of intelligent things. But at the end of the day, most advancement around society occurs at a table between a couple of people sharing ideas, taking away what they've learned and applying small changes to their lives. Nobody's going to walk out of here saying, oh, I'm going to completely change the way I think because Gabe said X, Y, and Z.
Don't give me that pressure. Please do not put that responsibility
But at the end of the day,
do not.
But at the end of the day, it's these very small things that come from conversations like this that each of us will go away and implement in our lives that makes society move. And I find that interesting. To that end, does anybody have any final thoughts before we close out?
I don't know. I think the gap between children and adults are, I think there isn't much of a gap when it comes to the cultural side of things. I think technology has sort of lowered the barrier for making life easier and, has put a lot of things in our benefit. There might be second or third order consequences that we look back later and, think about. But I think in the end, it all boils down to sort of, the responsibility, how you're handling it, and sort of accountability. And I think technology has played with those topics a bit.
Yeah. The more I look at what we've discussed, I'd say I'm in agreement with Gabe. Culturally, I think their gap is still there, but technology and social media have definitely brought it in. The one thing I'd like to add is that that I probably should have added earlier is I think for the most part, a small number of people are influencing a large number of people because of social media and stuff like that. So it's not like everybody's doing this. It's just that everybody's got an iPhone or some kind of device that they can see something with to go. Now, granted, you're not on Instagram, Case, you're Facebook, but let's just say it, millions, probably billions of people are, right? And so I'm not saying million, I'm not even saying 100,000 people are using social media as their platform for a pay or a job or whatever, but it's that small number that's influencing a big number. And so it's just going to grow and expand. And I don't know that it's any different from generation to generation what new technology or new things did to them. It's just now that we can see everything's in front of us real quick, right? When I wanted to know about the Green Bay Packers, I had to wait till next day's paper to read about the sports section. Now it's instant, right? Or anything in sports for that or news. We had to wait till next day. What? This happened?
The Packers lost against
the
Bears.
Right. Well, that's TV. TV brought that. You can see that instantaneously. But I'm always looking at the little moves, right? I'm looking, who did the Packers acquire? Yeah. Did they get that? Oh, man. I don't want them to get that bear. I'll stay away from him. But I mean, just I think it's just technology and social media have, and it's going to. There's no getting around it. I just think, how are we as parents influencing our children? And I'll be the first one to admit, I wasn't going to sit my kids down after a movie or a show or a news article that we talked about earlier in this, or not a news show after, and say, hey, what did you think about that? I just like, okay, they watched it, good to go. Mm-hmm. But really, it's that part of it where, what are you doing as a parent to at least talk to your kid about, because you're not going to stop them from looking at
reality's messy.
Yeah, reality is messy, and how are you
can prepare them that to your as kid? Much as you can, but core fundamental level, they just got to be, that's where it matters. I don't think,
my 3 kids are great. I love them to death, and I think they all have their own great path in life that they'll follow. And I don't think they're any, less likely to succeed because of what's going on. Right. I think, they've been able to succeed based on what they've been able to handle and do on their own, and grow up a little bit. Whether I was a big part of that or not, whatever, as long as they get to grow up and move on. So, yeah, I agree in some aspects there should be a bigger gap, but for the most part, I don't know how you're going to prevent it.
Yeah. No, I think that both of those statements are dead on. For me, I came in here, the gap has disappeared. I think it's a moving target, mainly thanks to technology, makes a parent's job a lot harder. But to some extent, it is, at least from listening to the two, it is best not to fight the tide, but to be along with it or educate above it. However you want to play that, like you're never going to fight the tide, right? You're never going to stand against the typhoon. But we can be there with and for our kids, and give them the tools to succeed. Whether they use those tools is up to them, but it's still about giving them the tools to succeed.
You're going to help them clean up after that typhoon and explain to them how to do it or help them, right?
Yep.
Or you're just going to be the one who lets them do it themselves.
Yep.
And they're going to learn on their own, and they're going to do it their own way, right? Whether we think that's right or wrong, really doesn't matter.
I mean, the way my kids act now, life is going to teach them a lesson. I'm not going to be teaching them much.
Right.
That's what,
sometimes life is the best teacher.
Right.
You are not wrong. Yeah. You are not wrong.